Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Division III November webinar. I'm Louise McCleary, and today I'm going to be joined by Ali Spungen. We're going to give you updates from our October Management and President's Council meetings. So we'll go to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit specifically what we're going to see on the agenda. And the council's had an opportunity to take action on the season of participation blanket waiver. I'll give you a few championship action updates. We'll also talk a little bit about the Sports Science Institute, and then I'll turn it over to Ali and she'll give you an update on the virtual NCAA Convention that will occur in January. We'll provide a few legislative updates. We'll also talk about the Division III Commissioners Association and their really all the research and the work they're doing around officiating. And then we'll wrap up with an NCAA staff update. So let's jump in and give a few updates. We'll start with the next slide and the season of participation blanket waiver. I think most of you know this, but if not, 2/3 of our conference offices, so overwhelming, requested that both Management Council and President's Council look at this blanket waiver. As soon as we received that request, what we did is we had 3 governance committees: our student athlete reinstatement, our subcommittee for legislative relief, and then a very important committee was our Division III National Student Athlete Advisory Committee, looked at that blanket waiver. All 3 committees endorsed it. And so at that point, it then went to our Management Council. Our Management Council had an opportunity to discuss it at length during their mid-October meetings. They also ended up endorsing that request, and so they ended up sending it on to President's Council, who, again, I believe most of you know, they also endorsed it. And what this blanket waiver does is it allows student athletes to compete up to the established dates of competition or contest maximums without being charged a season of intercollegiate participation or a term of attendance for any term, semester or quarter during this year, 2020-21, in which they were eligible for competition. I will tell you, these 3 governance committees, Management Council, President's Council, had a fantastic discussion around this. And really, both Management Council and President's Council came out and said, yes, we support this blanket waiver. We understand all the disruption that the pandemic is creating for our institutions and in particular our student athletes. However, both councils said that this recommendation does not serve as a rationale for future reduced enrollment by student athletes. Instead, what they did is they reaffirmed their commitment that intercollegiate athletics should be students against students. And so with that in mind, they're saying that, yes, you should have the benefit of this waiver, but there's still an expectation to full-time enrollment requirements in this current year as well as future academic years, and that's very consistent with our Division III philosophy. The other thing I will tell you in this space regarding the blanket waiver is that Jeff Myers and Bill Regan and the entire Division III Academic and Membership Affairs team has developed a frequently asked questions document. We anticipate that document being either released today or tomorrow, and you'll be able to find it if you go to ncaa.org, the Division III compliance page. So that hopefully we've started to get in lots of questions. What does this mean? How would we apply it for our student athletes? And that FAQ, we believe, will be incredibly helpful for you as you start to answer those questions. Let's talk a little bit about championships, another area that is very important. Management Council had an opportunity to act on 5 different championship actions. 2 of them not related to COVID-19 at all, and 3 were an absolute direct result of the pandemic. So the first 2 that you see on the slide in front of you, one, they did adopt non-controversial legislation to amend Figure 21.1 as incorporated in a bylaw to increase the composition of men's and women's tennis committees from 4 to 8, and that's going to coincide with the new regional realignment. They also, in a similar vein, they expanded from 4 to 8 the number of regions as they apply to the teams portion of men's and women's tennis championships. So the last 3 bullets are all directly related to the pandemic. And the first one that you see there on the chart is regarding that they reduced the minimum contest requirements for championship selection to 50% for winter sports for this year, again, 2020-21. Also, which we have sent out numerous communications on this, but the Championships Committee forwarded to the Management Council to act on due to COVID-19 testing, due to the need for predetermined sites to make sure that those sites are as safe as possible for competing teams, student athletes, coaches, the support staff, our athletic trainers, and all the costs that come with it. There's a great cost when you add in those 2 components. Determined that we needed to cap our winter and spring brackets for this year in both team and individual at 75%. And so there is some wiggle room there, but really that's where they're going to start with, that it needs to be capped at 75%. By doing that capping, what it ended up doing is it adjusted some of our winter sport championship selections a bit later. Some moved 5 days later, others moved more than a week later. And again, that has been published in our COVID communication that we send out every 2 weeks. It's also located on ncaa.org. If you go to the Division III homepage and you go to the archive publications, you would find all of those COVID communications in that location. We'll talk a little bit about the Sports Science Institute. Both councils had Dr. Hainline, our Chief Medical Officer, come in to speak to them. Again, we released, the Sports Science Institute, along with the COVID Advisory Group, released the resocialization of collegiate basketball guidelines. And then a few days later, they released a corresponding FAQ. And the FAQ, again, many of you have had an opportunity to look at it, but it includes a focus on the recommendations, such as the impact of the guidelines on Division III, on our division, guidance for student athletes returning from winter breaks, protocols for back-to-back games in one weekend, among other topics. It also provides guidance for testing, and it talks about the difference between low, intermediate, and high transmission, and when do you test? Again, as you know, COVID evolves and changes every single day, and so does the impact on our member institutions. With that said, Dr. Hainline and the COVID Advisory Group, they're already preparing the Resocialization of Sport, the 2nd edition. And we anticipate that coming out next week. And really what it does, it doesn't take a left or a right turn. There are no sharp turns in this latest resocialization guide, but instead what it will do is it will really clarify which sports, indoor and outdoor, are considered low, intermediate, or high transmission. It then also clarifies the recommended guidance around that in terms of testing protocols. And so that's something that currently all 3 divisions are looking at, those new guidelines. They're vetting it, they're providing feedback. And as I mentioned, we anticipate that being released to the membership next week. The other thing I'll mention that Dr. Hainline gave the update on is that all of our Division III commissioners, and I'm assuming now it was about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, received information from the NCAA about 3 COVID-19 testing companies, and that those 3 companies were willing to work with individual institutions to be able to secure testing assistance. Keep in mind, it's 3 companies. That email went to commissioners in all 3 divisions. So there's a bit of a backlog. We have heard from some to say, I haven't heard back from them as quickly as I thought I was going to. Rest assured, those testing companies are working as quickly as possible to make sure they answer everybody's questions, emails, and also to get the information out to institutions that want to use any of the three companies for COVID-19 testing assistance. And the last area that Dr. Hainline gave an update on is in early October, the NCAA, the Sports Science Institute, and the Office of Inclusion collaborated to have a transgender student athlete summit. This has been a topic that the NCAA has always been a leader in. Our current transgender policy was written in 2011. And really the idea was, since so many states have started to really prohibit transgender student athletes from participating, it raised the awareness of the NCAA to say, we want to make sure we're taking a lead in this. We wanted to have the summit so that we could bring together science, inclusion, and transgender student athletes to say, how should we update our 2011 transgender policy? The results of that summit were given to the Board of Governors. Right now, what we're doing is we're going back out, we're getting more research, we're getting more data collection, and what we hope and anticipate is that by the end of this current academic year, a recommendation will be given to the Board of Governors, and at that time, we will update our 2011 transgender policy. But to date, if you're looking for that policy, the one that is currently on ncaa.org is our most up-to-date policy. Something that we have heard consistently from the membership is, will the resocialization principles be mandated by the Board of Governors? There was a concern that that was going to happen at the BOG meetings that just concluded. While the Board of Governors received an update on the resocialization guidelines, there was no conversation, nor was there any action to make those mandatory. So we're not at a point where those resocialization guidelines are mandatory. Instead, it's guidelines. And what we would recommend, if I was doing my best, Dr. Hainline, is make sure you are working with your local and state authorities in this space as you navigate what is best for your institution and your student athletes. And so with that, Allie, I'll turn it over to you unless there's some questions at this time that I need to address.
Yep, thanks, Louise. And we do have a few questions coming in from the Q&A, and they pertain to, let's go, to reduce minimum contest requirements for winter championship selections to 50% for 2020-2021. So just can you share with us, will that mean that only teams that compete in 50% of minimums are eligible for the championship? And is there a reference chart available with those contest numbers at 50%?
So Allie, it's a terrific question, and I don't want to navigate myself into waters that I am not going to answer correctly. So we keep all of these questions in the Q&A, and what I'll make sure to do is to reach out to my colleagues in championships and make sure I get the correct answer and send it back out to everybody who RSVP'd for this webinar.
Great. And then just another question, is there any chance winter championships will be canceled at the Division III level?
It's a great question. Of course, there's always a chance. I think right now that's going to be dictated more by membership sponsorship, who's playing, who's not playing. We have heard already from 3 or 4 conferences that they will not be having winter conference play this year. But that's something that our championships committee continues to monitor. They will monitor it closely. And obviously, if the numbers come where there's not enough schools that are participating in winter championships, at that point, a decision will be made. But as of today, our championships committee is only monitoring that information, and we're still planning on having our winter championships.
Awesome. Thank you. Good to virtually see everyone today. So just an update on the 2021 virtual NCAA convention. Registration went live last Tuesday, October 27th, and it is free this year. So we encourage you to invite staff that normally wouldn't get to attend the national convention to register this year and take part. As a point of note, there are some key events from association-wide view. The State of College Sports, which usually was the plenary session, will be offered on Tuesday, January 12th. The Honor Celebration will be Wednesday, January 13th. And the association-wide keynote session will happen on Thursday, January 14th. For all the association-wide events, they will be held online from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern, so to make sure that everyone from the association can attend. Division 3 specific, our main meetings will be the Issues Forum, which will be on Thursday from 2 to 3:30. It will be just legislation based, so we'll only be discussing name, image, and likeness and giving updates during that time on Thursday of Convention Week. Our keynote speaker, who will be Lenora Billings-Harris, talking about unconscious bias, will be Friday morning from 10:30 to noon. And then we'll end convention on a different day than normal. It's not Saturday this year. Our business session will be Friday, January 15th from noon to 1 p.m. And then last but not least, I'd love to mention our brand new first ever LGBTQ and Allies reception, which will be held Wednesday of Convention Week from 6 to 7 p.m. So that will be right before the association-wide honors celebration. And then, as I mentioned, probably if you registered already, that educational programming will not be crammed in during the week where you typically were at convention. It will be offered throughout the month of January. So check those out and sign up today. And we encourage you to check out the Division 3 Convention resource page on ncaa.org. We will be posting as staff key information, your official notice, legislative proposal Q&A guide, and other educational sessions PowerPoints, just like we do for this webinar, will be available on that 2021 Convention resource page. And like I previously mentioned about the Issues Forum, we'll be going over the one legislative proposal, name, image, and likeness. And next month's webinar, we'll be covering that, so stay tuned. And as legislative updates, during our Management Council and President Council meetings, staff noted that Council had previously directed the subcommittee for legislative relief to extend and modify an existing blanket waiver, which permits Division 3 institutions to use virtual platforms to conduct recruiting activities involving multiple prospective student athletes. The Council also approved an official interpretation confirming that non-traditional coursework, for example, distance learning, correspondence, extension, or internet and virtual classes or courses, may be used to satisfy the full-time enrollment requirements for practice or competition in a manner that is consistent with established institutional policy used to determine the full-time enrollment status for all students. And then finally, we've been doing a lot of great work about officiating in Division 3, and that's to the support of our D3 commissioners. So all the thanks go to them for their collaboration and taking lead on this as a division and sharing it with our other two divisions. The Council received an executive summary of a study of the state of collegiate officiating. A year ago, the Division 3 Commissioners Association hired a contractor, the Pictor Group, to conduct a study of current officiating issues in Division 3, the NCAA's role, and current and potential initiative to address those issues. The study collected data from more than 15,000 key stakeholders via surveys, focus groups, and video conferences. And it helped identify our primary concerns moving forward. So overarching recommendations include organizational leadership and oversight, strategic alliances, and conference engagement. And overall, the comprehensive review has framed a strategic plan for the D3CA to implement over the coming months to address the most critical officiating issues facing Division 3. So stay tuned. I'll turn it back over to you, Louise.
It was about 4 or 5 weeks ago, the NCAA, similar to many of our campuses, took the step to say, let's make sure that we're being financially fiscal, and they instituted mandatory furloughs. For NCAA staff, it impacted all staff members with the exception of our vice presidents who had already taken a 10 to 20% pay reduction for the year. And those furloughs last anywhere from either 3 weeks or 8 weeks. They don't need to be taken all at one time. Many are taking them in 1 week increments. And I wanted to mention that because our Division III team, and when I say Division III team, it's those in governance, as well as in academic and membership affairs and championships, research, leadership development. We're all working through those furloughs. Our goal always is to give the best possible service to the membership, to answer your questions in a timely manner. But we also need to be realistic and know that as we work through these furloughs that will last through the end of January, there will be some delays. We've done, I think, a remarkable job of leaning on each other, as well as making sure that if you email us and it pops up that we're on furlough, it will give you the name of somebody that you can reach out to immediately to get the answer, or you can hold on that question until we return. So I wanted to give the update there with furloughs. I also wanted to say at the same time that the NCAA instituted the furloughs, they also gave the option for any staff member to take a voluntary separation or an early retirement. Those decisions impacted the Division III governance team the greatest in terms of all of our Division III members throughout the building. In that Debbie Kresge, our longtime executive assistant who really made things chug along for our governance committee meetings, chose to take a voluntary separation, and her last day at the national office was back in late September. Debbie Brown, who is our administrative assistant, will also be taking a voluntary separation, and Debbie Brown's last day will be the end of January. So you can only imagine if you lose your administrative assistant, you scramble a little bit, but we're thrilled that we have Debbie Brown until the end of January. And then if you haven't heard, Dan Dutcher, who is Mr. Division III, he's really been the only vice president in Division III, will be taking an early retirement. We can't replace him. His last day will be the end of January. And so what we're doing is knowing that we'll have the loss of both of our administrative assistants, the loss of our vice president, we're working very hard to figure out what's that transition plan going to look like. Once we know that, we'll make sure to share it with the membership. But what's the most important thing for you to know, and what our councils heard directly from President Emmerich, is that the Division III governance structure is a priority. And that will continue, the national office will continue to support those of us who are staying at the NCAA to make sure that our governance process runs smoothly, efficiently, transparently, and at the same time, we continue to give you a high level of customer service. So I wanted to end with that. No, the days aren't fun. I think we all get these emails. We're doing okay. We're doing as well as anybody else. And we will continue. We want to listen to you. If you have ideas, thoughts, please make sure that you email me or Allie, and we'll continue. We'll get through this, and we'll come out on the other side. So Allie, any questions?
Yes, we have one additional question, and I'm going to ask Jeff to come on and answer it, and it pertains to how long was the virtual platform for multiple PSAs extended for?
So the initial waiver was good through the end of this past summer, and the Subcommittee for Legislative Relief effectively looked at that along with input from the Interpretations and Legislation Committee, and extended it in conjunction with Convention 2022. So what they're going to do is effectively look at the recruiting bylaws, determine if changes should be made to those bylaws, and potentially propose legislation for Management Council and President's Council to consider sponsoring. Assuming it does get sponsored, goes to convention, then the waiver kind of works in conjunction with that process. If a proposal gets to convention, gets passed, then the new legislation will take over. If it gets to convention, does not get passed, then the waiver goes away as well. So it's working in conjunction with the legislative process until there's a determination by the governance structure and the membership of whether the legislation ultimately should be changed permanently.
Thank you, Jeff. Always great to have Jeff on for our AMA needs. Always a team effort here. So we just want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. We know that time is very valuable right now as we're dealing with many challenging times on campus and at your conference offices. So just a big thanks from your Division III staff family. We appreciate your support and have a great rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in.